services, replace roots.
When's the last time you looked at your homeowner's insurance?
We buy a homeowner's policy and never give it another thought until something happens. Life brings changes, and our coverage needs can change. The smart thing to do is get the answers and level up our insurance to make sure we're totally protected.
That's the Insurance Extra Point. Get out there and make something good happen today by calling Guahan Insurance Services at 475-1162 or visit us at the Camacho Landmark Center in Tamuning.
Subway keeps the Eat Fresh Refresh subs rolling in with the fresh take on timeless classics. Try the honey mustard rotisserie style chicken. It's the new Subway rotisserie style chicken with a flavor upgrade, mizzled with honey mustard on hearty multigrain bread and topped with fresh hand-sliced veggies. Craving some heat? The Baja Turkey Avocado hits all the hot notes. Oven roasted turkey stacks high on hearty multigrain speared with smashed avocado and drizzled with the piquant chipotle sauce. Tuck into new subs to savor at Subway. Eat fresh.
Welcome to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, the only show on talk radio where common sense is a lot more common. Phone lines are now open at 888-TALK. That's 888-8255. And now, The Point proudly brings you Tall Tales with Senator Bob Klitzkie.
A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. So I'm not going to say that on the air tomorrow, and I'm not going to say it on the air tomorrow, the day after. But I'll be back here on Monday. Holiday though it is, there's no holiday for the Second Amendment. It shall not be infringed. So here we go on another episode of Tall Tales, starting out with Zemi Ikotny. So if you looked at the editorial page of the Daily News today, I want to make something clear here. That's not my picture. It's just another good-looking haole. But it's not me. All right, Guam's special visitors, actors Leonardo DiCaprio and Tobey Maguire, showed residents that the island has a special value for guests, despite our struggle to recover from the pandemic. The island was starstruck on Wednesday when the Hollywood actors and childhood friends arrived for a brief stay in Tumum. Both actors have starred in big box office hits. Maguire is mostly known for his portrayal of Spider-Man, a role he reprised in this year's Spider-Man No Way Home. DiCaprio's role as Jack Dawson in the 1997 hit Titanic led to more critically acclaimed roles and an Academy Award in 2016 for the best leading actor in Revenant. Photos circulated online of the two enjoying Guam's beaches and popular spots. Residents were excited and eager to try to meet them. For those who did, we hope that the moment was cherished. The visit was a surprise to many residents, as it's not too often the island receives guests of their stature. Well, Leonardo DiCaprio is a shrimp. I'm probably a foot taller than he is, if you want to talk stature. In the past, talents like musicians Sugar Ray and Mariah Carey enjoyed the ocean and warm weather here. Model and actress Carmen Electra shot scenes for her movie on Guam. What was that? Max Havoc.
Max Havoc, yeah.
Yeah, and it wreaked havoc with the finances over in Gita.
To the max.
Yeah. Yeah. Netflix, and then Netflix's Operation Christmas Drop highlighted the sights and culture Guam has to offer. Except that, of course, the separatists hated every minute of it because it didn't have, didn't show the real essence of the separatist movement, right? DiCaprio and Maguire's stay may have been a mini vacation for the two, but the island was placed on a pedestal it hasn't been on in a couple years. Their presence brought happiness to the island's residents and reminded them that the place they call home has always had value to visitors. Tuman may be as lively as it was a couple years ago, and our economy hasn't fully recovered from the lack of tourism. But DiCaprio and Maguire's enjoyment of their time reminds residents of the value Guam continues to provide. The half-a-day spirit, hospitality, and gratitude. As our economic recovery continues, residents should maintain the island's value with weekend beach cleanups. How about highway shoulder cleanups between Dededo and Jigo? Isn't that awful, Jose?
It's the worst.
Yeah, we just have to. I'm ashamed to say where I live, afraid that someone's going to drive up there and say, you live up here in this, what Donald Trump would have said is a shucks hole village.
But it's easy to give directions. Turn left the trash bag pile next to the blue car. If you pass the red car with no doors, you've gone too far.
Yeah, and if there isn't a lot of tongan growing up over the rails on the side of the road, you know you're on the wrong road. The island has beauty that even the brightest of stars can recognize. We as residents of Guam should recognize that beauty and not wait for the biggest names to point it out. Yeah, well, it's an interesting editorial, obviously not Blue Star quality. And I mentioned on the show yesterday that, you know, that when someone of star quality comes to the island, you know, someone who is tall and good looking and famous, with the selfie phenomenon now, for the last 20 years or so, people have been carrying one of these things around in their pocket. So you take a picture with your telephone. What's the world coming to here? And game is to take a selfie of yourself with one of these good-looking, suave, articulate folks that, you know, are going to look really good in your selfies. And I know a lot of folks were disappointed that they couldn't capture either DiCaprio or Maguire. So just to make people feel better, yesterday I announced that tomorrow I'll be down at Ray tomorrow morning, and if people want, I'll come outside and they can catch a selfie with me in the picture. Just, as the governor would say, it's the least I could do. All right, let's see what we got on the card today. Of course, we've got systemic racism. Systemic racism. We've got another, you know, Public Law 36-34 has now become a feature on Tall Tales, even when the announcements are correct, especially when the announcements are correct, because they tip us off to the news that so often the four media outlets don't capture. And if you just look at those announcements, you can pick up a lot. Second item on the card is the papers. That would be the Post and the PDN versus Michael San Nicolas. You know, it's bad enough that he's got Jim Moylan running against him. It's bad enough that if he runs for governor, he's going to have to face off with Lou Leon Guerrero. He's got the two daily newspapers out there campaigning against him today. Then we have Hokuk versus Monglonia, and we have a decision on that. It didn't go by. It was not a knockout. It was the referees gave it to Hokuk, and I'll explain why. Yeah. And then we've got the Democrat Party versus Lou, and I've got Michael Bavacqua and George Stocku versus a Guam Constitution. I've got FBI versus Gods and Arrows, reference the Pacific Island Times. I'll just give you a little teaser here for the Pacific Island Times. This is what the cover of Pacific Island Times looks like. It says, "What cockfight ban?" And there's a very interesting article on the inside. I'm not going to tell you what it says. You know, I've got
Sounds like a dare.
It does. I'm not going to tell you what the article says because, my fortunes rise and fall with the Pacific Island Times. And, of course, you'll find an article, a column in there for me this week. And just once again, to kind of tip you off to all of the treasures inside that little paper, the title of the column is, Bro, Sunshine is the best disinfectant. So it's only $1.25. It's a good read. You really want to read that cockfight article. All right, next item on the card after that is everybody or all versus Biden, and civil society versus separatism, and Plessy versus Brown, if I ever get to it. I'm not going to take it off the calendar because it really needs to be commented upon. It's not instant, it's not breaking, it's not exciting, but it's important. That's why it's on the calendar. All right, so Paul Zerzan versus systemic racism. I think we all know the drill. You can't tell the truth about what color the rice is at the fiesta. You got to say that is red rice, even though your eyes are telling you, no, it's not red rice, it's orange rice. Because the narrative is it's red rice. And we see the narrative versus the truth on almost every subject that makes its way to the card here on Tall Tales. Next item on the card is the disclosures of Public Law 30, prompted by Public Law 36-34. And I'm looking at the announcement of the March 9 meeting of Departmentul Kauhagwinahan Chamorro, also known as the Department of Chamorro Affairs. And they did it right. They haven't made any mistakes in their agenda. Perhaps they'll wish they did after I make this announcement, because item on the old business part of the agenda, there is an item B1. And this is what it says. Final decision on operational/management responsibility. Now that portends some dire consequences for somebody. Final decision on who's going to be running the show. So, if I were a reporter, I'd look at that and I'd be snooping around at Departmentul Kauhagwinahan Chamorro to see what I could find out. And I'd darn sure be at that meeting on the 11th at 11 a.m. on March 9, because I think a good story lies within those words. What do you think the media will do with it, Jose, the four media outlets? What do you think they'll do with it?
Wait for a press release.
Wait for a press release from Melvin Wonpat, yeah. And that's what reporting's all about, right? Okay, next item on the card is the papers versus Michael San Nicolas. Now, I have the e-edition of the hard copy. Here it is. Headline story: Congressional Ethics Probe. Witness interviewed in San Nicolas investigation. There it is. That's the big news today. And the Post didn't put it on the front page. They got it on page 2. And it's, it almost is an antitrust violation, because they both wrote the same story. Or maybe they pulled a Buddy Orsini. One of them wrote it and sent it to the other one, who just published it like it was his own, right? But, and Ray really hit him on this one this morning, and Ray's absolutely right. The story is about the guy who's running the investigation, the House Ethics Committee investigation of Mike San Nicolas that's been going on, I think, since before Michael St. Nicholas was even sworn in. It just goes on and on and on. And every time some little thing happens, something like ethics committee buys new stock of computer paper, it gets in the paper, it gets in our paper. Or ethics committees reserve parking places enlarged by house janitors. It always makes the paper. So you read this, whoa, congressional ethics probe, witness interviewed in St. Nicholas. Whoa, this doesn't look so good for Michael St. Nicholas, does it? He wants to run for I mean, that's exactly what you get off it. So, of course, we know that the reporters for the Daily News make Sherlock Holmes look like an amateur because they are just out there snooping around all the time, and even something that you wouldn't even notice, they zoom in on.
You're right. I'm not noticing a thing.
Yeah, and they just pick up on it, and they won't take no for an answer. No matter how reluctant the subject is, they will put the squeeze on them till they get the story. That's the Daily News. Yeah, don't we wish? So I just got a window on my screen here about Facebook community standards. Does that mean I did something wrong, Jose? No, I still got Facebook here. Darn. Yeah. So
You're not trying hard enough.
So now, how did the local equivalents of Woodward and Bernstein come up with this story? Well, it seems that the guy who's going to be the witness, a guy named, what's his name, Manuel? John Manuel? Manuel?
John Paul Manuel.
Yeah, John Paul Manuel, who used to be St. Nicholas's chief of staff and apparently ratted him out way back when St. Nicholas first went to Washington. Now, there are rumors of a little skirt tearing going on here, because I think the story might be that John Paul Manuel thought, well, I'm all packed, I'm ready to go, I'm leaving on a jet plane, even though I'm not the Attorney General. But Michael St. Nicholas didn't take him to Washington. And Michael was hardly gone before John Paul Manuel ratted him out. And that's the basis of this ethics complaint. So the reason that these eagle-eyed reporters for the new newspapers got this is that Manuel was invited by the chairman of the ethics committee back at the House to come for an interview, to come for Washington for an interview. So Manuel wants to take leave. And he attaches this letter to his leave sheet that he turns in at the legislature to get, I think, 4 days leave. Even though the letter says, keep this to yourself, this is confidential stuff. So he turns in and over at the legislature. Well, who is the majority party at the legislature? Is it Democrats now, or is it Republicans?
It's the Democrats.
It's the Democrats. And has St. Nicholas been kind of tilting at any of the Democrats since he's been in Washington? Who would that be?
Kind of like the one in charge.
The governor, yeah.
Exactly.
And as St. Nicholas said, I'm thinking about challenging the governor.
He's been alluding to that.
Now, if I weren't sure of this fact, I would suspect something suspicious. I suspect that these reporters are over at the legislature every day going through everybody's leave sheet.
All the time.
All the time. If you go over there and you take 4 hours.
It's protocol.
It is. Yeah, they're just on this stuff unmercifully. They know everything that's going on over there. So if it weren't for that, I'd think, this whole thing is manufactured.
Absolutely.
Somebody at the legislature sees this and says, whoa. Yeah. Hello, is this Joe Titano? Is this the Joe? Is this the basketball player and the coach? Oh, it's not. Is this a reporter? Okay, I didn't want to talk to the real Joe Titano anyhow. Yeah. Hey, have I got something for you, Joe? I'm going to email you some papers that deal with Michael St. Nicholas. Do you think you might be able to run them?
I think it went like this. Something's going on. I can't say anything, but I suggest you do a sunshine request on leave.
Yeah, sunshine on.
That's all they had to do.
Yeah, not everybody. Just yeah, you're probably right, Jose, because the story said they got it on the sunshine, right?
Yeah, like who's going to go? Who's taking leave? We have to do a sunshine request.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I'm not going to tell you anything at all, but if you did a sunshine on John Paul Manuel, you might come up with something really, really interesting. Yeah, and they report it like it's news. Yeah. And if I were a pugnacious political strike that. Let me try another one. Yeah, I wouldn't put it past St. Nicholas to ding these two outfits for an in-kind contribution to Lou's re-election campaign, because that's basically what it is. So I don't think it's even news to start out with. And if it is, then they wouldn't have known about it had it not been for this, what we suspect is chicanery that went on behind the scenes. So here you go, nice going, Daily News. I've been so critical of you for not going out there and digging up the real news. This time you got it. Yeah, wow. So next item on the card is Hokuk versus Manglotnya. And these guys made the news because they were trying to come up with the rules for the impeachment of Governor Torres of Saipan of the Northern Marianas, who is a Republican, who was impeached by the Democrat House. So the articles of impeachment were sent to the Republican Senate, and the Senate had to come up with some rules to guide them through the impeachment. Now, the Senate has put together rules before when Benigno Fitial was impeached. The Northern Marianas Senate put together rules then that they didn't get a chance to use because Fitial resigned. But the Republican Senate didn't want to use those. They put together their own rules, but they wouldn't let anybody see them. I think probably because it was a personnel matter. They probably consulted with Rory on that one, and Rory said, no, we can't let you see the rules. We can't talk about it because we're prohibited from talking about it. If you woke Rory up in the middle of the night, caught him asleep, he came in and shook him. You say, Rory, wake up. Oh, it's a personnel matter. I'm prohibited from talking about it. So when the rules finally were made available to interested folks, they're really stacked in favor of the governor. And tempers flared, and Manglotnya, one of the two Democrats in the Senate, really took issue with this. And not only are the rules stacked against him, but they had a gag rule. You could only speak for 3 minutes when you finally got to see the rules. So Manglotnya challenged that. He went outside. He tried to testify. He used the microphone for out in the peanut gallery that regular folks would use. They wouldn't let him do that. And then he came back in, and Hokuk had enough. And he used some rather foul language towards Manglotnya.
Well, it was a cockfight.
Very true. Very true. And came out into the well at the legislature and was ready to duke it out with Manglotnya. I think they got about as far as touching gloves before the referee, the sergeant at arms, broke it up. But today there is a decision on that bout, and the winner was Hokuk, not by a knockout, but by, a rather uneven decision. And here's how I came by that decision. A story that ran in Candid News. Senate Republicans pass lopsided rules. Okay, so I suspect that it was almost as though Hokuk rallied the troops, just like Brett Kavanaugh did at his confirmation hearing. Or maybe Hokuk was out there, maybe he was, how was the fina tomorrow? Jasenia na eleknia, win one for the Gipper. All right, let's take a short break and we'll come back to the next item on the card.
Half a day. This is Jade Uggan from Security Title, and in celebration of Tomorrow Month, here is a tip on dealing with your land. You might be thinking of giving part of your property to your child or another family member. Once you have subdivided the property and recorded the map, you will also need to record the deed transferring the title. Just drawing the map is not enough to make sure they actually own the land. Protehi I Tanonmu. When it comes to your family land, call the professionals at Security Title. We are here to help.
Listen to The Point anytime, anywhere on Odyssey. Odyssey is your new audio home for all the music, news, sports, and podcasts that matter to you. Find your favorite stations like The Point and discover more. Music stations, local and trusted news sources, sports talk and team coverage, plus today's biggest podcasts. Find it all on the Odyssey app. AUDACY.
Attention tailgaters. It's time for you to get a new tail to gate on. It's a fact. They got a 2021 model clearance going on all kinds of your favorite Nissan models, the Rogue Sport, Kicks, Murano, Titan, and they've all got great FM radios so that you can pick up tall tales in the afternoon. 0% APR or your first 3 payments are on Nissan. Zero down magic tailgaters. Learn more by visiting nissanguam.com.
We now return to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, soaring over the confusion with his superpowers of truth. Call 888-TALK. That's 888-8255.
Okay, so here we are back again on Tall Tales. Next item on the card is Democrat Party versus Lou. And this is another one. It's kind of like the San Nicolas story. You really don't need to go much beyond the headlines. And this one ran in the Post. Governor, too soon to lift mask mandate, but crowd limit eased. Too soon to lift mask mandate, but crowd limit eased. And then I have a story here that ran on Newsmax. Dems backing away from pro-mask stance amid political concerns. And most of the people at the State of the Union weren't even wearing masks, for crying out loud, including the president, the vice president, and the Speaker of the House. And let's see, I saw this, but I didn't incorporate it into the card. But one of our posters said, yeah, I can't read.
Jose Tapaco.
Well, what did he say?
Why isn't this making the front page? The Air Force has dropped the mask mandate, but the governor chose not to follow the lead of the feds.
Well, probably the Air Force didn't put out a ready. You know what ready-to-eat food is?
MREs, yeah.
Yeah, ready to eat. You just stick the package in the microwave, turn it on, pull it out, peel the tinfoil off, and chow down. Yeah. Apparently, the Air Force didn't send these super media outlets ready to print press releases. Like Neil Weir sent to PNC News, right? So if you don't get if it's not a good press release, it ain't news. So the governor is sticking with the masks, right? Now, I have a couple of theories as to why she's doing that. First of all, wearing a mask for Democrats is like wearing a MAGA hat for Republicans. It's a badge of belonging, If you're a Democrat, there are two things. You got to be pro-abortion, and you got to wear. I don't care if you're outside, or I don't care if you're in your own house watching TV. You better wear that mask, or hope that no other Democrats see you. That's the simple answer. The second answer is this: the governor wants to keep her emergencies going. She just put us on for another one. Well, maybe it's this. So long as she can keep making these arguments for the emergencies, then she could short circuit the procurement process.
She's gaslighting the feds.
Uh-huh.
She needs
But
more.
she can short circuit the procurement process. Now, yeah. So the next thing to watch for is an announcement that the governor has hired a new legal counsel. That she's taken her son-in-law out of mothballs and brought him back to the front office to get these procurements moving. That would be the next thing to look for. I'm just rumor mongering. It isn't even a rumor. It's just
just putting it out there.
Yeah, just putting it out there to see what happens. Just kind of like they do with the headlines on the two papers today, right? Yeah. So Lou is probably the last Democrat that's still sticking with the masks, and all over the country is just falling apart now. And of course, we've known from the get-go that the masks were foolishness, that they don't stop the disease at all. They do stop you from breathing, increasing the amount of carbon dioxide that you're inhaling. And I found out, of course, my eyes, I have to see farther, but I've noticed when I've got the mask on, it's a little harder to walk around because you actually have to bend over to see what's right in front of you because the mask blocks your vision.
Well, what's interesting is a specific mask that is effective, or at least more effective than anything else you can wear. But that's not being mandated.
No, and it never was.
Just the mask.
Yeah, it doesn't matter what mask it is. You can borrow your wife's handkerchief and tie it around your nose. You're masked up. You can come in. Hey, you're not out. Get out of here. All right, next item on the card is Michael Bavacqua and George Stocku versus a local constitution. And the separatists don't want a constitution. And they point out the obvious to you as though it's a reason that we shouldn't have a locally generated constitution. I've explained it before, but I'll do it again in the context of these two columns here. And of course, the separatists don't want it because if it were a constitution for a state of the Union, it couldn't do the things the separatists want. There couldn't be reserved parking places for Chamorros. There couldn't be special fishing rights for Chamorros. There couldn't be all of these, and if you can't do all this stuff, why do you even want to be independent, right? So if they enacted a constitution and then after independence comes, which is what they're hoping for, it's going to have to be tossed on we'll just have to start over anyhow. And that's kind of what they're leading us to believe. We won't even think about a constitution until after we're independent, and then we'll come up with something. Probably write it on the back of an envelope on our way to Washington. That one about Lincoln wrote the Gettysburg Address. Well, he wrote the Gettysburg Address
on the back of the caboose?
Back of an envelope when he was writing to Washington, yeah. There's a little more to it. I can't remember how it goes. Anyhow, we start out with Michael Bavacqua and his Friday column. This ran in the Daily News. Bavacqua, Guam should look at problems Virgin Islands faced. If we want to know more about the potential problems that Guam might face, we need look only at the U.S. Virgin Islands. Guam has held 2 constitutional conventions, drafted 1 constitution, which was rejected overwhelmingly by Guam voters. And I understand that that's another thing. Hope Cristobal is taking credit for deep sixing that second Constitution. Since World War II, the U.S. Virgin Islands have held 5 constitutional conventions: 64, 71, 77, 80, and 2009. Now, what has World War II got to do with that? You know, the enabling legislation wasn't even on the books until, for Virgin Islands, the 60s. Despite these 5 attempts, none of the draft constitutions has been adopted, as each faced opposition either at home or in the federal government. You know, now there's a Department of Constitutions in the federal government, right? And I've mentioned this before. If you go to D.C., along the mall there's this classic Washington, D.C. building with the Doric columns, and, you know, it looks just like so many other buildings in D.C., and there's a plaque on the front of it that says the Screw Guam Bureau. And there are a couple of hundred bureaucrats in there whose sole mission is to figure out ways to treat the territory of Guam poorly.
You've been reading too many of these columns.
Yeah. So I suspect that right next to that, there is a denial of Constitution Bureau. And the motto there is, we don't care what the territories want, we're against it. Okay, despite these 5 attempts, none of the draft constitutions have been adopted, as each faced opposition either at home or in the federal government. The federal laws that enable Guam and the Virgin Islands to draft constitutions seem to be very straightforward. You're given a chance to create a document to help build your foundation for self-governance. But it has to fit within the U.S. framework, comply with U.S. laws, and recognize the U.S. controls your island and your resources, kind of like a state constitution. While you're told, on the one hand, that this document is meant to represent what the people of a place might want for their future, where does all this stuff come from? You know, this is just BS. In truth, the reality is your Constitution represents more of what the U.S. wants, what it's comfortable with, its interest, and not necessarily yours. Well, the purpose of these constitutions is this. We have an Organic Act now that established our governmental structure. And it had a section in it that was a Bill of Rights. It contained almost everything in the Constitutional Bill of Rights. But the main thing was one governor appointed by the president, legislature, no more than 21 members, 2 terms, etc. Up until the point where we're at now, where we elect our governor, we can have as many as 21 senators. We have our own Supreme Court, etc. But in order to amend the Organic Act, which is our local equivalent of a constitution, it literally takes an act of Congress. So the Organic Act, as amended, said that the governor was responsible to provide an adequate public school education for every child. We wanted an elected board of education. So we changed it to say government of Guam instead of the governor. We wanted to elect our attorney general instead of having the governor appoint. Act of Congress. We changed the Organic Act, and on and on and on. So if we want to change the structure of our government, we have to have an act of Congress to do it. Not a very good way to run a government. Now, you can talk about self-determination and decolonization and all the rest of that, but that's really what we're talking about here with a constitution. In 1968, when Congress was dealing with the Elected Governor Act, the so-called Mink Amendment, an amendment made by Congressperson Patsy Mink of Hawaii, was added to the bill that said that the following parts of the Bill of Rights, to the extent that they didn't apply in Guam before, now apply as same as they would in one of the states. That's our Constitution. And we could even change that. or Congress can change it. Okay, so Bavacqua sees this Constitution, wants you to see the Constitution as the kind of document that an independent country would enact. Is that surprising? Because everything that he does, every little decision, channels you to think, well, yeah, we can't do that. But if we were independent, we could. So you say that to yourself 250 times, and some folks will say, yeah, maybe we should be independent. Not thinking it through, kind of being conditioned in that regard. So he of course has to take the obligatory slam at the U.S. government. While you are told on one hand that this document is meant to represent what the people of a place want for their future. No, it's what they want right now. In truth, the reality is your Constitution represents more of what the U.S. wants, what it's comfortable with, its interests, and not necessarily yours. Do you have electricity at your house, or do you use gaslight to find your way around in the dark, Jose?
I just open it up to page 24.
Yeah. Well, talk about gaslight.
Plenty of light.
This is part of the inherent problem with drafting a constitution as a territory. Now, I've hammered this before. I'm going to Bavacqua here. States don't draft constitutions. It's territories do. It's a condition to admission to statehood. While all current U.S. territories want to have a productive and positive relationship with the U.S. and be able to work with and receive help from it, not all are necessarily want to become fully integrated into the U.S.
Let's see that poll.
Yeah. Now, while all territories enjoy benefits and privileges tied to being a U.S. territory, each also faces challenges that they may not be able to attend to if they become subsumed within the U.S. fully. So the only way a territory can be subsumed fully into the U.S. is if instead of being an unincorporated territory, a territory becomes an incorporated territory. Now, you ask anybody, what's better, unincorporated or incorporated? Yeah, that's better. It's not.
Nope.
Hawaii and Alaska and most of the states were incorporated territories before they became states. Hawaii, selective service applied in Hawaii. There were a lot of people drafted from Hawaii in World War II. So that applied. The United States income tax applied in Hawaii. All of the rules about interstate commerce applied in Hawaii. But as an incorporated territory, folks in Hawaii got to vote, right? Wrong. The only thing that the folks in Hawaii got to vote for was a non-voting delegate to the Congress. Hawaii elected its first governor when it became a state. As an incorporated territory, its governor was appointed by the president. So, once again, here's a guy who either doesn't know what he's talking about or doesn't care what he's talking about. He goes on to say, for example, in both the defeated Guam Constitution in 1959 and the most recent U.S. Virgin Islands Constitution, the federal government requested changes be made that explicitly acknowledge and accept U.S. sovereignty and control over the islands. Okay, so you could have a constitution, Guam could draft a constitution that says Guam is sovereign and the United States is not the sovereign authority over Guam. Yeah, that really makes a lot of sense. That's what we call independence, Bavacqua. And, of course, that's exactly what you're pointing at. Okay, we got to take a short break here, and I'll come back to Bavacqua and Stakyu.
Come try Guam's original Chamorro restaurant with Pica's best 5 years running. Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro. Experience Chef Peter's candied salmon over scallion coconut rice, octopus to naktak, Chamorro platter, and their award-winning gourmet hamburgers. Or if you're looking for something healthy, try their keto-friendly menu. Come and enjoy Mezcla's half-a-day service at their Hagåtña and Grand Plaza Tumon location. Call their Hagåtña location at 479-2652 for reservations.
So here we are again. So the last sentence, the last paragraph. For example, in both the defeated Guam Constitution in 1979 and the most recent U.S. Virgin Islands Constitution, the federal government requested changes be made that explicitly acknowledge and accept U.S. sovereignty and control over the islands. None of the states have this, of course. None of the states recognize that they are subordinate sovereigns and that the sovereign nation is the United States of America. In the case of the Virgin Islands, their most recent constitutional attempt made mentions to the U.S. Virgin Islands controlling its waters and resources, which the Department of Justice flagged as problematic and needed to be changed. For islands, the water that surrounds you and its resources are key to your sustainability. Yours to preserve or yours to harvest and extract. Well, the United States did give control over coastal waters, except to coastal waters adjacent to military bases, to the territory of Guam several years ago. Now, it's not an unfettered control because we do have eco-fascists in Washington, just like we have eco-fascists here. And we do have our 200-mile economic interest zone that probably is a little bit beyond the capability of the Guam police to patrol. So we have the U.S. Coast Guard that handles that. So once again, it's very nice emotional sentiment, but just completely gaslighting.
And without a plan.
Exactly.
Period.
For islands, the water that surrounds you and its resources are key to your sustainability, yours to preserve or yours to harvest and extract. Good emotional pitch.
I just want to submit Tumon Bay, 1980s into the 1990s, period.
Yeah.
When we had control of our own bay.
Very nice.
That was not sustainable at all.
No. Okay, now meaning the ocean, connects you to other islands, to trade, to your ancestors, everything. Whoa. Good emotional pitch here. In both territories, there's naturally a strong desire that people who live in the island should be able to decide how the resources can or can't be used. The decision should not be made by those who live thousands of miles away. But neither Guam or the U.S. Virgin Islands would be able to put that into their constitution, even though it could be argued it would be an essential element of self-government, essential element of independence, which is what they mean by self-government. We have self-government right now. We have more. We could have more self-government than we do. We've had the ability to do our own taxes since 1986, our own constitution since 1977. Everything else we do right here, except for cockfighting. Man, am I upset about that. Neither Guam or the Virgin Islands would be able to put that in, even though it could be argued it would be an essential element of self-government. Within the U.S., that would be under federal control. Not necessarily. This is why determining a political status, choice, or direction is critical prior to undertaking the writing of a constitution, which means that we'll struggle along with the Organic Act forever. You know, it's better to drive around on ball tires because you don't like the guy who's selling tires, even though he'll give you a good deal on tires. Better to drive around on ball tires than put new tires on the car when you could easily do that.
This also seems like a form of denial,
yeah.
Right? As long as we don't have a constitution, I can still pretend that people don't want to be a part of the U.S.
Exactly. Yeah, it's Vladimir Lenin's analysis of Tsarist Russia. The worse things get, the better for us.
We just saw the survey, the Guam survey, even though it was not a scientific survey.
Yeah.
The majority of people wanted to have some part of the United States, either as a state or I don't think the Commonwealth was on there.
Yeah.
Free association,
Yeah.
right? And I know that independence was on there also, but this doesn't coincide with that study or any other study or even all the people that go to the states that are from Guam that keep coming back and forth.
Well, once again, if you're familiar with Lenin, Lenin deviated from Marx because Marx said that communism is inevitable, that the capitalists, the bourgeoisie, will exploit the workers to the point that the workers will throw up their hands and say enough. There will be a violent revolution. The workers will take over the means of production and distribution and displace the bourgeoisie. That didn't happen. And Lenin came along and said the workers aren't smart enough to figure this out. There has to be an intellectual cadre of revolutionists that will, educate the people and bring them along so they'll understand this. So I'm not saying Bavak was a communist, but if he were, he wouldn't be a Marxist, he'd be a Leninist. He is that intellectual spark, that would jump in and get the people to think about what they really should be doing. This is why determining a political status, choice, or direction is critical prior to undertaking the writing of a constitution. If you want to be fully under the U.S., it means giving up these types of land and sea claims, unless you want to be independent. If you want to retain them, then you need to seek more autonomy. We'll get into more specifics about the U.S. Virgin Islands constitutional attempts in next week's columns. I can't wait. Yeah. So next here I have a letter. This is from George Stockhue. About once a month, fires off a letter to the editor. George, if you've been around Guam politics for a long time, you'd know that George Stockhue, better known as George Stockhue, was Antonio Borja Wanpat's right-hand man, both in the legislature and in D.C. And since his name is Stockhue, he's Gizatnya. Right, Jose? Gizatnya?
Okay.
He's from Jonia.
Oh.
Yeah. And, say again?
Ungan.
Ungana. Yeah. And the title, letter, Guam can't write its own constitution without U.S. approval. Okay. Well, actually, it can. If you and I could write a constitution for Guam today, yeah, we don't need anybody's approval. Here it is. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's not going to have any effect, but there's nothing stopping us from doing it because we live in a free society. You wouldn't be able to write your own constitution in Russia or probably even in the Ukraine, come down to it. All right, let's break for the big halftime show, and we'll come back to George Stockhue.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
Fire in a Ukrainian nuclear power plant extinguished. I'm Jack Callahan, Fox News. Ukraine's president says Russian forces shelled Europe's largest nuclear plant in southeastern Ukraine, setting it on fire, triggering memories of Chernobyl.
The good news is that we are hearing from authorities, the International Atomic Energy Agency, saying that they do not believe that they are seeing any signs of radioactive leaks right now. But obviously, if shelling were to continue there, you can break the confinement chamber. Then obviously things could go very wrong very quickly.
Fox's Jonathan Hunt in Lviv, Ukraine. South Carolina Senator Lindsey Graham calling on Kremlin insiders to assassinate Vladimir Putin, saying it would be a great service to the world. Senator Graham telling Fox's Hannity the Russian president likely feels invincible.
What's happened is that Putin looks at Biden, he sized him up, he thinks he can get away with it, and he's going to keep going and going and going, and nobody in the West is going to stop him.
An expatriate Russian businessman has offered a $1 million bounty on Putin's head. The White House resisting calls to ban Russian oil imports. Press Secretary Jen Psaki saying they don't have a strategic interest in reducing the world oil supply. 18 senators have signed onto a bill that would force the issue. West Virginia's Joe Manchin says a ban would be an economic weapon that could hurt Putin.
I'm as concerned now about what this could escalate into if we don't do what we're doing now and stop. And hopefully he will understand the economics of this to his country.
City Council in Newark, New Jersey, suspending the licenses of Luke oil stations in the city because the parent company is based in Moscow. State lawmakers in Florida have approved a bill to ban most abortions after 15 weeks of pregnancy, only months ahead of an anticipated Supreme Court ruling on a similar law in Mississippi. America is listening to Fox News.
Come try Guam's original Chamorro restaurant with Pica's Best 5 years running. Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro. Experience Chef Peter's candied salmon over scallion coconut rice, octopus to naktak, Chamorro platter, and their award-winning gourmet hamburgers. Or if you're looking for something healthy, try their keto-friendly menu. Come and enjoy Mezcla's half-a-day service at their Hagåtña and Grand Plaza Tuman location. Call their Hagåtña location at 479-2652 for reservations.
President Biden's pick for the U.S. Supreme Court, meeting Thursday with more of the senators who will decide whether to confirm her.
Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson likely doesn't need any Republican votes, but some Democrats have said they'd like the process to be bipartisan. Jackson did get 3 GOP votes when she was elevated to the D.C. Court of Appeals last year, but she may not get Senator Lindsey Graham's vote this time around. He said she's the pick of the radical left. Thursday, Jackson met with Minnesota Democratic Senator Amy Klobuchar.
Interesting to have someone with a background as a public defender and also have a brother who is a police officer and an uncle who is a police chief.
She also met with Nebraska Republican Ben Sasse and earlier this week met with Iowa Republican Chuck Grassley as well as Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, both of whom said she'll be treated with respect but thoroughness. Jessica Rosenthal, Fox News.
California's Governor Gavin Newsom unveiling a plan to create mental health courts in every county in the state, allowing treatment for more homeless people with mental health and addiction disorders, but will also compel some of them into care, a move that advocates for the homeless say could be a violation of their civil rights. President Biden has signed legislation ending forced arbitration in cases of sexual assault or harassment in the workplace. A Los Angeles Dodgers pitcher suing an online news platform over defamation claims.
Trevor Bauer took to Twitter Thursday to announce his defamation lawsuit against Deadspin, and managing editor Chris Bode filed in New York City citing Geo Media, who owns Deadspin, saying they took part in, quote, an unrelenting attack on Mr. Bauer with the purpose of humiliating him and ruining his baseball career. This after Bauer came under accusations of sexual assault from a woman with whom he had engaged in multiple rough sexual encounters. Charges were not filed against the Los Angeles Dodgers ace after evidence showed that those encounters were consensual. The complaint also citing accusations of harassment and misogynistic behavior against Bauer. The Dodgers pitcher is seeking punitive and compensatory damages. Matt Napolitano, Fox News.
And I'm Jack Callahan. This is Fox News.
Guam's largest tourist attraction group. The pandemic's been very tough for all of us, and particularly for my team members. So I'm really appreciative and grateful for the PUA assistance to our team members, and more recently, the SVOG federal grant that allowed us to reopen these facilities and re-employ everyone at a critical time when PUA ended. From myself and my team, on behalf of all of us, thank you for the federal funds that allowed us to reopen.
The federal fund you provide saved many, many jobs. Thank you. Thank you so much.
We employ about 35 technicians for our shows. Thank you for the federal funds that kept us going.
Thank you for helping with the federal funds.
Thank you for the federal funds.
Thank you for helping to save our jobs.
Thank you for the federal funds.
This ad was paid for with official funds from the office of Congressman Michael F.Q. San Nicolas.
When's the last time you looked at your homeowner's insurance?
We buy a homeowner's policy and never give it another thought until something happens. Life brings changes, and our coverage needs can change. The smart thing to do is get the answers and level up our insurance to make sure we're totally protected.
That's the Insurance Extra Point. Get out there and make something good happen today by calling Guahan Insurance Services at 475-1162 or visit us at the Camacho Landmark Center in Tamuning.
Okay, so here we are, another great halftime show. We're back here in the second half of Tall Tales for today, the last episode of Tall Tales for this week. So start sympathizing with Jose and I, who go into sort of a talk show limbo or hibernation for 70 straight hours, commencing at 1800 today, and we won't be back until 1600 on Monday. But you can bet your bottom dollar we'll be back on Monday, loaded for bear, as it were. All right, next item on the card is a letter to the editor from George Stocchio. And this is what George Stocchio says: Guam can't write its own constitution without U.S. approval. There is a saying in Latin, nemo dat quod non habet. No one can give what one does not have. Okay? The Bible tells us that God handed down to Moses the 10 Commandments tablet. Most nations' supreme laws were not divinely inspired or God-given. Sovereign nations write their own constitutions without outside intervention. Now, there is the key right there. And that is what Michael Bavacqua keeps telling us. Sovereign nations write their constitution without outside intervention, unless they happen to be Cuba working with the Platt Amendment. Then they do get some outside intervention. But that's another story. Nations gain their sovereign rights to act independently through various means and different processes. So the way that this nation would gain its sovereignty would be to get the United States Congress to say, effective July 4th, 2023, the United States relinquishes its sovereignty over the island of Guam. Nations gain their sovereign rights to act independently through various means and different processes. and often the process was as important as the goal itself. The American colonies went through a bloody armed revolution to gain independence. Called it the Revolutionary War. India achieved its independence from England in 1947 through, quote, passive resistance. Vietnam became a sovereign nation in 1954 when it wrested control of its country from the French through insurgency. Now here, this kind of tells you everything about George Stockio's scholarship. The Philippines obtained its sovereignty through a political agreement with the United States. No, it's not how the Philippines obtained its political sovereignty. The Philippines obtained political sovereignty because in 1934, the U.S. Congress passed a statute called the Tidings-McDuffie Act, which said that the Philippines will become independent of the United States in 12 years. And leading up to that independence, the Tidings-McDuffie Act established something called the Commonwealth of the Philippines, which was heralded at the time as self-governing for the Philippine Islands. They elected their own president, etc. But if you go back and look at the Philippine Commonwealth government situation, they weren't as self-governing as the territory of Guam is right now. That's how the Philippines obtained sovereignty, through an act of Congress. And if Guam is to obtain sovereignty, that's how it would happen. Closer to home, Micronesia became quasi-independent when the UN Trust Territory of the Pacific Islands was dissolved in 1986. The United States retained residual power on matters of defense and foreign affairs. Well, I don't know if that was, I guess you could say that. It's part of the Compact of Free Association, which actually was a treaty. The Northern Marianas was originally part of the Trust Territory, but it became a Commonwealth of the United States through a compact approved by Congress in 1976. I applauded Guam's attempt to draft a constitution of their own, choosing as it did in 1977 under Public Law 13-202 and Congress's Public Law 94-584. The referendum required by federal law was defeated. I was also sympathetic. Here's the key part of this letter to the editor. I was also sympathetic with the aims and sentiments to adopt some aspects of the 1950 Organic Act as Guam's constitution by my good friend, former Senator Bob Klitzkie. Well, the guy has at least one redeeming virtue. Yeah, now what he's talking about is the bill that I introduced into the legislature to patriate the Organic Act, which, well, could I say it was a brilliant idea? Well, it was my idea, so, should have tried to avoid.
It's an oxymoron.
Yeah. I was thinking more in terms of superfluity. It was my idea. It was an excellent, talk about redundancy, right? So the idea was this, that the Organic Act, the parts of the Organic Act that dealt with the government of Guam, the actual mechanics of our government would become the Guam Constitution. But the difference between that and where we are now is that we could amend that Guam Constitution locally. And my idea was that in order to amend the Constitution locally, you'd have to have the proposed amendment passed by 2 successive legislatures and then send it out for referendum, which coincidentally is the way Wisconsin amends its Constitution. So, I'm leery of making it too easy to amend any constitution. The U.S. Constitution's only been amended 26 times in the entire history of the country. California, the California structure is such that the Constitution, I think, is bigger than the statutes. Because anything you want to do in California turns out to be a constitutional amendment. So if we made it too easy to amend, I keep coming back to the salary snatch and grab in the WANPAT 10. We have to protect ourselves from our own government, is what it amounts to. If you've forgotten about the WANPAT 10, Lieutenant Governor Ray Tenorio, when he was the acting governor, had a bill that gave several manakilu in the government of Guam sizable raises and raised senatorial salaries from 55 to 85 grand. So acting Governor Ray sent that to the legislature, called the legislature into session, which the governor has the power to do. The legislature, no public hearing, less than 2 hours on the floor, passed that bill, sent it to the governor, who signed it the same day. The WANPAT 10. And of course, you know, people, the conventional wisdom here for politicians, especially the legislature, yeah, you know, we can do some pretty outrageous things like giving ourselves raises and giving ourselves sick leave and annual leave and stuff. And you know, people get riled up for a few weeks or so, but then they'll forget it. And by the next election, nobody even remembers it. Well, I still remember the WANPAT 10. I still remember Tony Atta being in the forefront of the WANPAT 10. I still remember that when the San Nicolas 5 in the next legislature attempted to roll back that salary smash and grab, Tony Atta wouldn't have it. And like 6 other rascals, Tony Atta was turned out. Not to worry, though, because he was Ray Tenorio's lieutenant governor candidate. And in his stump speech shortly after the campaign began, yeah, you know, it was a good idea. We deserve those raises. That's why we have to be protected from our government, and we can't let the government make important decisions on short notice. Witness all the trouble we're having with the Sunshine Law and the Open Government Law. So 2 successive legislatures would mean that there would be public hearings and debate from 2 different bodies. And if the constitutional amendment got through that, then it goes out to an amendment, out to a referendum from the people. I think it's a really good way to go. And to me, it makes a whole lot more sense than to say, here is a drawing board with nothing on it. We are now going to create a constitution of our own, and we'll make up every single thing about it as we go along. Certainly not efficient way to do. And the nice thing about doing the patriation, as per my approach to it, was that we phase into it. It's not a gigantic shock where today it's the Organic Act, tomorrow it's a new constitution, with everybody running around saying, oh gosh, what do we do now? So that's what George Stockiu is talking about here. He says, I was sympathetic with the aims and sentiments to adopt some aspects of the 1950 Organic Act as Guam's constitution by my good friend, former Senator Bob Klitzkie and others. Endgame, where I differed from them, with them, was in how to achieve the endgame. As a U.S. territory, Guam cannot arrogate unto itself the right to write its own constitution without Uncle Sam's imprimatur, and it cannot allocate government power it does not have, nor can it transfer provisions in the Organic Act without authority from Congress. These are not counterfactual situations. Well, my patriation bill would have required an act of Congress, of course. And the other things here that Stockiu goes into, territory cannot allocate government power it does not have. Nobody says it can. The Guam Constitution would allocate the same power that is set out in the Organic Act right now. Nor can it, Indeed, Guam should continue to speak out on political status issues, including a locally crafted constitution, and to focus its attention to becoming an incorporated territory. Whoa. No, no, no. Incorporated territory, you want to pay your taxes to D.C. and not have the mirror image? Kiss the Section 30 money goodbye? You might as well junk the whole Gita operation because no more qualifying certificates. Interstate Commerce Clause applies to Guam. Not a good situation at all, George. You've fallen into that trap. Well, which is better, incorporated or unincorporated? Oh, incorporated's got to be better, right? To focus its attention to becoming an incorporated territory without an implied promise to become a statehood, to become a state. Well, that's what an incorporated territory is. All of the continental territories were incorporated territories because all of them, each of them was in a holding pattern pending the necessary population and locally drafted constitution to become states. That's what it was all about. So, you know, you kind of need to know what you're talking about here, George. And he says, an incorporated territory with all the rights and privileges that Hawaii and Alaska had enjoyed prior to being admitted as states. Well, they didn't have the rights and privileges that we have right now. Sorry about that. They couldn't even elect their own governor. Selective service, income tax, etc. We have far more privileges than an incorporated territory would have. I don't know how many times we got to go through this. And of course, Tina's still over there talking about the insular cases. While Guam has no equal footings with the states, it should not be silent on social justice issues, such as the SSI program. I don't think the SSI program is a social justice issue. I think it's a ex gratia transfer payment motivated by a sense of statism. It's not a social justice issue. So he says, Guam has no equal footing with states of the United States. It should not be silent on social justice issues, public health, education, infrastructure allocation, and public land issues. Then he goes on to say, military malpractice. You know, I see my friend Frenchie on the line there. Frenchie, I'll get to you just a second or so. Frenchie wants to talk about tax breaks, candid news, and the magistrate's report. We'll get to him in a minute. It's encouraging indeed to learn of the Department of Defense reducing its real estate footprint on the island. However, it's difficult to be grateful for the changing military landscape on Guam when the publicly announced plan is to lease the government of Guam land previously. Now, when you see this word, this is a tell, previously confiscated from Chamorros. No, it wasn't confiscated. It was taken by eminent domain, just compensation. The whole, confiscated means, in essence, just taking it through governmental power. The Department of Defense should not be in the real estate business. It's military malpractice. It's also hard to show appreciation for a mutually beneficial partnership when a lopsided lease scheme only serves the military's interest. Eagle Field, the designated site for the new civilian hospital campus, could serve both civilian and military in wartime or a COVID-like environment. Have you been reading the paper here, George? That's exactly what we're talking about. A simple grant to Gov Guam without conditions seems eminently more equitable. Well, you kind of got to know what you're talking about if you wade into these issues, and unfortunately, I think you pretty well demonstrated, George Stockhew, that you don't know what you're talking about. So much for that. Okay, so next I've got Repeat on the line, and I've got Frenchie. So let's see. Let's head for Wrigley Field. We'll do a 7-inning stretch, and we'll see if we can find Frenchie and Repeat out there in the center field bleachers.
Listen to The Point anytime, anywhere on Odyssey. Odyssey is your new audio home for all the music, news, sports, and podcasts that matter to you. Find your favorite stations like The Point and discover more. Music stations, local and trusted news sources, sports talk and team coverage, plus today's biggest podcasts. Find it all on the Odyssey app. AUDACY.
Half a day. This is Jade Uggan from Security Title, and in celebration of Tomorrow Month, here is a tip on dealing with your land. You might be thinking of giving part of your property to your child or another family member. Once you have subdivided the property and recorded the map, you will also need to record the deed transferring the title. Just drawing the map is not enough to make sure they actually own the land. Protehi I Tanonmu. When it comes to your family land, call the professionals at Security Title. We are here to help.
Attention tailgaters. It's time for you to get a new tail to gate on. And it's a fact. They got a 2021 model clearance going on all kinds of your favorite Nissan models, the Rogue Sport, Kicks, Murano, Titan, and they've all got great FM radios so that you can pick up tall tales in the afternoon. 0% APR, or your first 3 payments are on Nissan. Zero down magic tailgaters. Learn more by visiting NissanGuam.com.
Okay, so here we are back on Tall Tales at Wrigley Field for the 7th inning stretch. I see a couple of guys reaching for the sky out there in the center field bleachers. A couple of baseball fans in the stands out there, even though it's March and probably not very good baseball weather. I've got Frenchie and what's his name, Jose?
Pete.
Can you say that again?
Pete.
Repeat?
Pete.
Okay, repeat. All right, we got it. All right, good afternoon, Frenchie. Let's hear what you got to say.
Good afternoon. Well, I wanted to talk about something I saw in the morning paper today, in page 6 of the Guam Post. There was an article that was written by Phil Leon Guerrero, titled "Tax Breaks Proposed for Elderly Housing Projects." And right away, my ears kind of perk up because of something I remember from last year. But anyway, it's Bill 259-36, aka Acton Guma Incentive Act. And it's...
but you know, there's a problem with that bill. Pardon the interruption. There's a problem with that bill. Somebody put Tello's name on it without her permission.
That's right. I was gonna mention that Tello's name is on it. She introduced the bill.
Heads will roll.
It's being co-sponsored by Amanda Shelton, Sabina Perez. So it's good to know that Sabina is interested at something else beside rescuing puppies. Joanne Brown, Frank Blass, and the infamous Pido Telare. I guess he might be worried that his son might be in prison when he gets too old, and he might have a use for one of those housing for the elderly. But then right away, like I said, my ears perked up because last year on my feast day in June 29, 2021, I wrote an article in the Jungle called "They're Back." And it was basically talking about Dr. Eusebio, So the GMH and GRMC, he works at both, and who was trying to push on us the arrival of a new order of nuns who takes care of the elderly, but unfortunately is tied up to the neos, if not directly, indirectly, with a strong connection with the neos. And, since Eusebio is tied up to GRMC and they understand very well how to get corporate help with taxes, this is exactly what those sisters are supposed to do. And I'm wondering, Eusebio and the neos are up to their dirty old tricks that they have been doing for a long time. And who gave that idea to Tello? If maybe somebody at Allelup, I don't know. So it is a story that I'm going to follow and dig in a little bit, because there is more to it than what it appears. Of course, on first look, it looks nice. It's an idea to give tax incentive to build housing to care for people that are no longer independent or have anybody to help them take care of themselves.
The old people that don't have their own talk show. So
That's right.
So nobody listens to them, right?
That's correct. So that was one thing that I wanted to bring up to your attention. I see that you read it. There is a lot of tax credit, 100% credit on business privilege, 75% rebate on income taxes for 20 years, 100% abatement on real property tax, and 100% exemption on use taxes. So it's a pretty sweet deal, and I wonder, with Eusebio being right in the middle of it, how is that going to impact us? The other thing I want to talk about is talk about something that Troy did on Candid News, which is, I think, a good public service. And because, you and I are old enough to remember the crime blog on our local papers that would tell us that so-and-so was stealing candies at the store and got caught with their hands in the jar and all those things. But so he started on his blog a monthly column, which he called the Magistrate's Report. And I think what that shows, besides these things that he highlighted, so for the months of January and February, we had 52 cases of family violence, 10 cases of child abuse, 17 assault cases, 17 aggravated assaults, 8 sex crime, 1 murder case, and 1 attempted murder case. What I dug a little more into it, I also found out that Troy followed through and found out that none of those cases was adjudicated yet, including the murder case. And out of all those people, only 4 are up for trial. They have all been arraigned. 4 are repeat offenders.
What kind of offenders?
Repeat, like the person waiting in the green room. And there is no progress beyond arraignment for all the other cases. So it's 87 cases, 39 perps from Guam, 45 from the FSM, and 3 white dudes. So here we go. Actually, it's 2 white dudes and 1 white girl. So, so it's very interesting. I think it gives a non-emotional analysis of the crime on Guam. And one thing it shows is that the Attorney General is basically not doing his job.
Well, I'm especially interested in the repeat offenders because they're probably going to be represented by the alternate public offender. And you know, our repeat just brought in another defense verdict just yesterday. So justice triumphed again. So those ones that are repeat offenders, if my suspicion is correct, they're all going to be walking. But go on, Frenchie.
Yeah, so, but that's what I wanted to bring to your attention. I think Troy has done, once again, he's done a little bit of mud racking there and went into, this is all public information, but regular media doesn't do the job, and Troy is a good alternative on his website to put those cases up, and it's quite fascinating. You know, it shows what the crime was and everything, and how right now it is being disposed or not.
Frenchie, I check Candid and Jungle Watch every day before I even go to the newspapers.
Yeah. So thank you. Well, so really, I mean, the AG is up for re-election, and I think it's good that those statistics are coming out and that people see what is happening out there in that climate of insecurity that we're having, where people not feeling safe at home, and certainly the days where people kept their doors unlocked has long been gone. So, so this is it. That's it for me today. Not too controversial, but two things that I think impact the life of people living on Guam seriously, and we'll see what happens from there.
I appreciate it, Frenchie. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks for
calling. I will listen to repeat. That sounds like fire coming at us. All right.
We'll listen to repeat. Say it again, right? Okay, Frenchie.
Yeah, say it again.
Yeah. So repeat is probably feeling his oats right now because he did bring in another defense verdict here. I think that might be three in a row or something like that. But I'm sure he'll tell us about it, and then he'll tell us about the repeat offenders. Does that mean you're representing them all, Pete?
Sometimes, but just to add to Frenchie's point, I did some digging, and there's a authorization for 25 prosecutors, and right now they're down to 9 line prosecutors. They've lost in the last 6 months just as many prosecutors.
Have they all been detailed over to the declaratory judgment branch of the Attorney General's office?
I don't know, but they've all been returning back to the States or here on Guam looking for greener pastures.
Well, on Guam, they're probably looking for browner pastures, but that's another story.
Right. But getting back to the Constitution issue, I think one of the things that obfuscates the people when they think about this is the Neil Weirs and the Ann Hattoris, where they confuse our status and our history and everything just to support their arguments. I disagree with the folks that say that writing a constitution is putting the cart before the horse. I think if you really think about what they're saying, they're the ones putting the cart before the horse, because they're saying they want to write a sovereign constitution. Well, that's not what this is about. The U.S. government has authorized a constitution similar to the states, what the states have. It'll be a territorial constitution, but for all intents and purposes, it would operate nearly identical to what the states have, instead of having a federal statute as our enabling document, as our organic document. And so we've missed the opportunity, and that was the main point of the article that I had written. We missed the opportunity to have local control over the changing of the government, and also to insert things that we care about, that the federal government doesn't necessarily care about. And we see that in other state constitutions. So, I disagree that not writing a constitution is the way to go, because we have to wait until we're sovereign. I think that is really putting the cart before the horse.
Unless what you really want is independence, Pete.
Right. That's exactly what I'm saying. I mean, if we get there one day, then we get there one day. But for now, it's like saying, it's 8 a.m., and it's going to be a long while for dinner. Do you want a snack? No, I can't eat until dinner. We shall not eat until dinner. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, well, dinner may never come. So you better get something now. So anyways, that was most of the point of why I was calling, but I wanted to tell you about my trip to Vegas. I met a lot of the old folks from GPD. Henry Terlahi threw a great GPD reunion out there. Do you remember a guy named Tom? Oh, I'm gonna misstate his last name. I think he was the guy 40 years ago who established the Crime Stoppers.
Tom
Marks or something like that.
Mm.
But he was in attendance, and I got to meet him, and he told me the stories about how things started out with the Guam Crime Stoppers. But it was a great time. I don't know if you got a chance to flip through the Facebook page and see all the old faces. But we had a great time. We're going to try to do it every 2 years now.
Well, next time, let me know. I'll go myself.
Oh, that would be great. That would be great. I don't know if you like Vegas. I was there for 10 days, but I didn't spend a nickel on gambling because that's not my thing.
I hate Vegas. But, yeah.
They might have it in a different venue. That's one of the options they're thinking. Vegas for the event is great because you've got all the things you need nearby, the hotels, the entertainment. It will attract people versus if you have it somewhere, some remote location in the middle of Wyoming or something like that, then people may not show up.
True enough. Yeah, one time I had a relative that worked in Circus in Reno. So we had our own little family reunion in Reno that year. And one of the things we did was we took a little field trip out to Virginia City, which is a pretty interesting little place. And when I parked the car, they comped me 2 rolls of nickels. So we went in and everybody gambled and ate and we had a really good time. And finally we're on our way home. And I had a car full of relatives, and on the way back to Reno, somebody said, well, yeah, I did okay. I lost $50, but it was worth it. I had a good time. And they went through that. And finally somebody said to me, Bob, how did you do? And I said, I came out winners, $4. Because I still had those 2 rolls of nickels.
Right. Well, if you buy $10 worth of coin or whatever it is, you could get drinks all night. So you could end up winning that way.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Yeah. But you could tell you're in Vegas because every gas station, every restaurant, everything had a slot machine in it.
Yeah.
So I think Guam soon needs to ship our gaming machines over there because they don't seem to have enough over there, and it's illegal here now.
Well, does our Attorney General know that it's illegal, or is he right now preparing a complaint for a declaratory judgment?
Well, I thought he stood on the right side of that issue. I think he followed through with what Barrett Anderson started, I believe, to try to get those things decertified.
Yeah, I think you're right, yeah.
Yeah, so there's some redeeming qualities. I guess not everybody's all bad.
Well, I
say
guess
that again?
Yeah. Can you repeat that? Yeah.
Don't say it too loud. All right. Thanks for the time, and I'll see you guys. The last thing I wanted to say, on Monday, we have the day off, but I kind of chuckle at that because it's not just one day out of the year that I'm Chamorro. I'm Chamorro 365. So. Yeah, that's just if that's the way it's going to be, then I should not have to go to work at all.
Oh, God, ti tomorrow, no, lo.
Yeah.
Elect si Madeline Berdallo, ti tomorrow, lo tomorrow gi corazon ho. To which the question was, I don't know, heart transplant, Madeline.
Well, there's another. I'm sure you're familiar. What tomorrow say? Tomorrow by.
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I know what you mean. Right.
I don't know if the FCC would approve that.
Yeah.
But anyways, have a great weekend. We'll suffer through the weekend with you all, and we'll catch you on Monday.
Good talking to you. Repeat. So long. Yeah, he's always got a really good delivery, and if you don't catch it the first time, he's sure to repeat. All right, so let's see. Let's head for Churchill Downs, see what's going on at Churchill Downs.
Di ang inyong bangko na tapat sa serbisyo. Tunay na kaibigan at handa para sa inyo. Ang bangko ng kinabukasan, laging maaasahan. And Pacific, where others put branches, we place roots.
Come try Guam's original Chamorro restaurant with Pica's Best 5 years running. Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro. Experience Chef Peter's candied salmon over scallion coconut rice, octopus to naktak, Chamorro platter, and their award-winning gourmet hamburgers. Or if you're looking for something healthy, try their keto-friendly menu. Come and enjoy Mezcla's half-a-day service at their Hagåtña and Grand Plaza Tuman location. Call their Hagåtña location at 479-2652 for reservations.
So here we are, Churchill Downs, Louisville, Kentucky, the home stretch of tall tales for another week. Darn it. Yeah. Next item on the card is everybody versus Biden, and it's kind of reactions to his State of the Union speech. And it's quotes from people on each party, giving a realistic assessment of what Joe Biden said. But it's almost overcome by events. It's a little bit stale. So I'm going to go back to something that I want to work on here. Civil society versus separatism. And it's Laura Sauder's column. I started on this the other day. And she says, or the title is, What Does Chamorro Nation Building Mean in a Colonial Setting? And that's a really good question. And there is an answer to it. And one of the quotes that I pulled out of her column is this: nation building refers to the process whereby a people consciously and deliberately engage in shaping the institutions and priorities that fulfill their aspirations. In this context, nationhood or exercising cultural sovereignty has less to do with geographical control than it has to do with control of the psyche and identity consciousness of a people. Yeah, I agree with that. I find, you ought to, if anybody's down there with a thermometer, I got a feeling there's ice forming in the lower regions right now. Hell is freezing over. But, we talk, the word culture here is just batted around all the time, and I'm pretty much convinced that most people don't know what it means. They find it as a really easy crutch to grab in any art. Oh, yeah, it's part of our culture. So the last time we talked about this, I had a quick and dirty a definition. Culture can be defined as all the ways of life, including arts, beliefs, and institutions of a population that are passed down from generation to generation. Culture has been called a way of life for an entire society. As such, it includes codes of manners, dress, language, religion, rituals, and art. Okay? Now, that does not mean, or that does not require a political undertaking. So nations can exist in more than one nation can exist in one political country. That's basically the point here. Nation building refers to the process where a people consciously and deliberately engage in shaping the institutions and priorities that fulfill their aspirations. In this context, nationhood or exercising cultural sovereignty has less to do with geopolitical control than it has to do with control of the psyche and identity consciousness of a people. Well, if you understand that, then you'd agree with me that right now here in this colony, territory, or whatever other pejorative term you want to identify the island with, there is a Chamorro nation. And that's why I say, if you really want to study the Chamorro culture, you're in the best possible place and the best possible time to do it. Right now, right here in the island of Guam. I suppose there are some cities in California that may run a close rivalry, but that's what culture means, and that's what nationhood means. So nationhood doesn't mean an independent state. Now, again, Michael Bavacqua would try to gaslight you into thinking that the only way you could have a Chamorro nation celebrating Chamorro culture is if Guam were independent, because the United States won't let you. That's basically what he's saying. So I want to go from there. I want to segue from there to critical race theory, since Robert Underwood has now put that on the skyline, telling us that he has been teaching critical race theory since 1972. So I want to contrast a couple of Supreme Court cases, Plessy versus Ferguson and Brown versus Board of Education. And I'm going to tell you this. Brown, in my estimation, was one of the worst decisions that the United States Supreme Court made. Now, I just know out there in the audience, people are saying, yeah, but Brown ended segregation, so it's a good thing. And I've talked so many times here on the show about analyzing the result that the judiciary reaches compared to the process that it uses to reach the result. And I think the Supreme Court used the wrong process to reach that result, and because of that, we are still suffering today. That Robert Underwood and his critical race theory, etc., all had their genesis in Brown versus Board of Education. And I mentioned this before, and I'm going to spend a little time on it later on. A guy named Philip Ellman was the clerk for Mr. Justice Frankfurter, a very liberal justice. And Ellman went from clerking for Frankfurter to the Office of Civil Rights in the Department of Justice. Frankfurter had ex parte communications with Ellman during the time that Brown was sub judice at the Supreme Court. And what Brown and Frankfurter and Ellman did should have at least gotten Ellman disbarred and Frankfurter impeached, if not potentially some jail time. I know that sounds pretty fantastic, but it takes a story that takes a little while to tell. And one of these days I'm going to tell that story so that you have a deeper understanding of what Brown is really all about. But let me start out with a key language from Brown versus Board of Education, which was decided in 1954. This is from Mr. Chief Justice Earl Warren wrote the majority decision, and he said, or wrote the unanimous decision, we come then to the question presented. Does segregation of children in public schools solely on the basis of race, even though the facilities and other tangible factors may be equal? I got to stop there and tell you that one of the reasons that cert was granted and the appeal from the Topeka Board of Education is because the facilities were equal. You know, there weren't the schools for the black kids were not inferior to the schools for the white kids, and that's exactly why Brown versus Topeka was chosen. Okay, so children in public schools solely on the basis of race, even though the physical facilities and other tangible factors may be equal, deprive the children of the minority group of equal educational opportunities. We believe that it does. Such considerations apply, and then there's some language that I'm going to skip over, with added force to children in grade and high schools to separate them from others of similar age and qualifications solely because of their race generates a feeling of inferiority as to their status in the community that may affect their hearts and minds in a way unlikely to be undone. I notice I got somebody trying to get in here. Let me see who it is. It's another Joe. Yeah, wants to talk about the invasion of Ukraine. It's really on point. Yeah, going on here. Feeling of inferiority is their status in the community that may affect their hearts and minds in a way unlikely to be undone. Now, this is a Supreme Court decision. Do you hear all of the law I'm talking about here? You don't? It's because I'm not talking about the law. I'm talking about feelings. The effect of this separation on their educational opportunities was well stated by a finding in the Kansas case by a court which nevertheless felt compelled to rule against the Negro plaintiffs. Quote, segregation of white and colored children in public schools has a detrimental effect upon the colored children. The impact is greater when it has the sanction of the law, for the policy of separating the races is usually interpreted as denoting the inferiority of the Negro group. A sense of inferiority affects the motivation to learn. Segregation with the sanction of the law, therefore, has a tendency to retard the educational and mental development of Negro children and to deprive them of some of the benefits they would receive in a racially integrated system. And it cites to footnote 10 and then goes on to say, whatever may have been the extent of psychological knowledge at the time of Plessy versus Ferguson, this finding is amply supported by modern authority. Going back to footnote 10, here's what footnote 11 says. Effect of prejudice and discrimination on personality development, mid-century, etc. And it cites several scholarly works. Including the psychological effects of enforced segregation. What are the psychological effects of segregation, etc. Getting down to what I think is the real basis for this decision. Myrdal, An American Dilemma. Sociologist Gunnar Myrdal wrote a book in 1944 called An American Dilemma, and that's the basis for Brown versus Board of Education. It's not about the law, it's about sociology. And we thought that Warren was a conservative. Of course, Eisenhower said the worst damn fool mistake I made as president was appointing Earl Warren as Chief Justice. Now, compare that to Justice Harlan's dissent in Plessy versus Ferguson, an 8-1 decision that said, yeah, I'm going to have to come back to this tomorrow. And I will, because I think this is really important with what's going on today. Okay, it's that time of the day. I've got a visual aid to help me get my point across today, and that is, let's go, Brandon. Yeah.
Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
Close call at a Ukrainian nuclear power plant. I'm Jack Callahan, Fox News. That plant in southeastern Ukraine shelled and parts of it set afire by Russian forces. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky calling it terror.
We are issuing a warning. No country has ever shot at nuclear blocks except for Russia. First time ever. For the first time ever in our history, in the history of humankind, the terrorist country has reverted to nuclear terror.
A fire in that plant has been put out. The UN Nuclear Watchdog Agency says there are no reports of increased radiation in the area. It's believed none of the plant's 6 reactors was breached, but Ukraine's defense minister says had they been, it would have been 10 times worse than the nuclear disaster in Chernobyl in 1986. Despite building pressure, the White House is not planning to end imports of Russian oil. Press Secretary Jen Psaki explaining.
We don't have a strategic interest in reducing the global supply of energy, and that would raise prices at the gas pump for the American people around the world because it would reduce the supply available. And it's as simple as less supply raises prices.
A bipartisan bill has been introduced in the Senate that would force the end of the Russian oil imports. Secretary of State Antony Blinken has just arrived in Brussels for 6 days of strategy sessions with European allies.
The European Union is here, NATO is here, and so you've got a whole host of meetings here to deal with the response from the West. NATO has bolstered its forces across the alliance in Europe, especially along the Russian border areas. And then there are discussions on accounting for possible war crimes. Secretary of State Antony Blinken says there will be accountability at some point after this, especially the apparent shelling and targeting of civilians.
Fox's Rich Edson reports from Brussels. Secretary Blinken will also visit Poland and Moldova, where hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians have fled. America is listening to Fox News.
Get all of your favorite Fox News podcasts ad-free on Apple Podcasts with Fox News Podcasts Plus. From Trey Gowdy, the Fox News Rundown, Will Kane, Brian Kilmeade, and so much more. Go to foxnewspodcasts.com for all the details. The Fox News Rundown, a contrast of perspectives you won't hear anywhere else. Your daily dose of news twice a day. Featuring insight from top newsmakers, reporters, and Fox News contributors. Listen and subscribe now by going to foxnewspodcasts.com.